The wind cut through Ethan Morrison like 1,000 frozen knives as he urged his horse forward through the blinding white chaos that had descended upon the Nevada territory without warning. It was January 1876, and what had started as a routine cattle drive north of Yarrington had turned into a desperate fight for survival when the blizzard swept down from the mountains with terrifying speed. He pulled his coat tighter, squinting through the snow that felt like needles against his exposed skin, knowing that finding shelter soon was not just important but absolutely critical if he wanted to see another sunrise. His horse whinnied nervously, ears flicking back and forth as the animal struggled through drifts that were already knee-high and climbing. Ethan had been working ranches in Nevada for nearly 6 years now, ever since he turned 18 and left his family farm in Kansas, seeking adventure and independence. He had seen his share of harsh winters, but this storm felt different, more vicious somehow, as if nature itself had decided to wage war against any living thing caught in its path. Through the swirling white curtain ahead, Ethan thought he saw something dark against the snow. At first he dismissed it as a rock or fallen tree, but as his horse drew closer, his heart lurched. It was a person, collapsed in the snow, barely visible beneath the accumulation. Without hesitation, he dismounted, his boots sinking deep into the drift as he stumbled forward. The figure was small, wrapped in buckskin and fur, and when he brushed away the snow from the face, he found himself looking at a woman, a native woman, her lips blue with cold, her dark eyes struggling to focus. "Hey, stay with me," Ethan said, his voice nearly lost in the howling wind. He could see she was conscious, but barely, her body trembling violently from the cold that was stealing her life away one moment at a time. Without thinking about tribal politics or the tensions that sometimes existed between settlers and the indigenous peoples of the region, he simply saw another human being in desperate need. He lifted her as gently as he could, surprised at how light she felt in his arms, and managed to get her situated on his horse in front of the saddle. The woman mumbled something in a language he did not understand, her head lolling against his chest as he climbed up behind her and wrapped his heavy coat around them both. His horse protested the double weight, but obeyed when Ethan urged the animal forward, searching desperately for any kind of shelter. The cold was intensifying, and he knew they had perhaps an hour, maybe less, before exposure claimed them both. Fortune smiled on them when Ethan spotted an outcropping of rocks that formed a natural overhang, creating a space just large enough for a man and horse to huddle together. He guided his mount into the shelter, dismounting carefully while keeping the woman secure, then pulled her down into his arms and carried her to the driest spot he could find against the stone wall. His fingers were numb as he worked to start a fire, using the small amount of dry wood he always carried in his saddlebag along with some dried grass and his flint. The spark caught after what felt like an eternity, and soon a small but steady fire pushed back the deadly cold. Ethan turned his attention to the woman, whose trembling had not subsided. He had heard enough stories about cold exposure to know that she needed warmth immediately. He removed her wet outer layers carefully, respectfully, replacing them with his spare shirt and wrapping her in both his bedroll and the horse blanket. Then he sat beside her, adding his own body heat to help raise her temperature, keeping his movements proper and his intentions clear even though she seemed barely aware of her surroundings. As the hours passed and the storm raged on outside their small refuge, the woman began to recover. Her trembling lessened, color returned to her lips and cheeks, and eventually her eyes opened fully and focused on him with sharp intelligence. She studied him for a long moment, taking in his weathered face, his sandy brown hair, and his blue eyes that held concern rather than threat. She spoke again, and though Ethan could not understand most of the words, he recognized them as Paiute, the language of several bands who lived throughout Nevada. "You are safe," he said slowly, hoping his tone conveyed what his words might not. "Storm bad, you rest." She watched him carefully, then spoke in halting English that caught him off guard. "You saved my life, white man." "Why?" Ethan met her dark eyes and answered with simple honesty. "Because you needed help." Did not seem complicated. Something shifted in her expression, a subtle softening that suggested his answer had surprised her. "I am Violet Tallwater," she said, her English accented but clear. "Daughter of Chief William Tallwater of the Yerington Paiute Band." The revelation that she was the chief's daughter sent a jolt of concern through Ethan. He had heard of Chief Tallwater, a respected leader who had managed to maintain peaceful relations with the settlers around Yerington while also protecting his people's interests and dignity. The last thing Ethan wanted was for there to be any misunderstanding about his intentions in helping the chief's daughter. "Ethan Morrison," he replied. "I work at the Double M Ranch north of town. I was moving cattle when the storm hit. Found you just in time, I think." Violet nodded slowly, pulling the blankets tighter around herself. "I was gathering medicine plants in the foothills. My people know I go alone sometimes. The storm came too fast, too strong. I tried to return but lost my way." Her voice carried frustration at her own predicament. "My father will be worried. When the storm ends, I must return quickly." "When the storm ends, I will take you home myself," Ethan promised. "Make sure you get back safe." The night stretched on, and they took turns feeding the fire and keeping watch. Ethan learned that Violet was 20 years old, unmarried, and known among her people for her knowledge of healing plants and herbs, a skill taught to her by her grandmother. She asked him about his life, and he told her about growing up on a farm, about losing his parents to fever when he was 17, and about coming west to start fresh where memories did not haunt every corner. "You carry sadness," Violet observed, her perceptiveness catching him off guard. "But also strength. You do not let the sadness control you." "Try not to," Ethan admitted. "Some days are harder than others, but out here there is always work to do, always something that needs tending. Keeps a man from dwelling too much on what he has lost." As dawn approached, the storm finally began to weaken. The wind died down from its furious howl to a strong but manageable blow, and the snow changed from a blinding wall to scattered flurries. Ethan ventured out to check conditions, and found that while several feet of snow now covered the landscape, the worst had passed. The sky to the east showed the first hints of pink and gold that promised sunrise. He returned to find Violet standing, testing her strength, her expression determined despite the ordeal she had endured. "I can ride," she announced. "My father's camp is perhaps 2 hours south and east from here, in the valley where the river bends." Ethan knew the area she described. "I will take you," he said again, brooking no argument. "My horse can carry us both that far, and I want to make sure you arrive safely." They set out as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the snow-covered world in shades of rose and amber. The beauty was breathtaking, and despite his exhaustion, Ethan felt his spirits lift. Violet rode in front of him again, but this time she was alert and aware, occasionally pointing out landmarks that guided their way. As they traveled, she told him more about her people, about their history in this land, and about the challenges they faced as more settlers arrived each year. "My father is a wise man," she said. "He knows that fighting will only bring death to our people. But he also will not let us be pushed aside as if we do not matter, as if this land was not ours long before the white men came." There was no accusation in her voice, just a statement of fact that Ethan could not dispute. "Seems to me there should be room enough for everyone," Ethan offered. "Though I know it does not always work that way. I have seen settlers act with greed and cruelty. I have also seen your people treated with disrespect they do not deserve. It is not right." Violet turned her head slightly to look back at him. "You are different from many white men I have met. You see people, not just skin color." Before Ethan could respond, they crested a rise and looked down into the valley below. Through the trees, he could see the Paiute winter camp, dozens of traditional structures arranged in a careful pattern near the river, smoke rising from morning fires. But he also saw movement, many figures moving about with what appeared to be urgency and concern. As they descended toward the camp, several men on horseback spotted them and raced forward. The riders surrounded them quickly, and Ethan recognized the wariness in their eyes even as relief flooded their faces upon seeing Violet safe. She spoke rapidly in Paiute, gesturing to Ethan, and he heard his name mentioned. The warriors, all younger men around his own age, listened intently, their expressions shifting from suspicion to what appeared to be gratitude. One of them, a man with a strong build and intelligent eyes, addressed Ethan directly in English. "I am James Tallwater, brother to Violet. She says you saved her life in the storm, that you gave her shelter and warmth and protection. Is this true?" "I found her in the snow," Ethan confirmed simply. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," James said firmly. "Not anyone. Many men, white and native both, would have left a lone woman to her fate, or worse, would have used her vulnerability for evil purposes. You did neither. You acted with honor. My father will want to meet you and offer proper thanks." They escorted Ethan and Violet into the camp, and he felt dozens of eyes upon him as they passed. Children peeked out from behind their mothers. Elders watched with weathered faces that revealed nothing, and young warriors studied him with expressions ranging from curiosity to lingering distrust. Ethan kept his posture relaxed but respectful, understanding that he was a guest here, and that his welcome depended entirely on his behavior. They stopped before one of the larger dwellings, and an older man emerged, his bearing immediately identifying him as someone of importance. Chief William Tallwater was perhaps 50 years old, his face lined with experience and wisdom, his dark eyes sharp and assessing. When he saw Violet, profound relief washed over his features, but he controlled his emotions with the discipline of a leader who could not afford to show weakness in front of his people. Violet dismounted and went to her father, speaking to him quietly in their language. Ethan remained on his horse, not wanting to presume, until Chief Tallwater gestured for him to dismount and approach. Ethan did so, meeting the chief's eyes with respect but not submission, understanding that in this culture, as in the cowboy culture he knew, respect was earned through strength tempered with honor. "Ethan Morrison," the chief said, his English excellent and barely accented. "My daughter tells me you found her dying in the storm, that you gave her your warmth, your shelter, your protection, asking nothing in return. She says you treated her with respect and honor, as a father would hope any man would treat his daughter. For this, I am deeply grateful. You have given me back something more precious than gold or horses or land. You have returned my child to me alive and well." "I am glad I found her in time, Chief Tallwater," Ethan replied. "She is brave and strong. The storm was fierce, but she fought to survive." The chief nodded slowly, then glanced at the sky where the sun now stood fully above the horizon, bathing the snow-covered valley in brilliant light. "The storm has passed, and a new day begins. This is significant. In my culture, we believe that the sunrise brings new beginnings, new opportunities, new paths forward. He paused, studying Ethan with an intensity that made the cowboy feel as if his very soul was being examined. "I would like to make you an offer, Ethan Morrison. One that I do not make lightly, and one that will sound strange to your ears." Ethan waited, his heart beating faster with anticipation and confusion. Around them, the camp had grown quiet, as if everyone understood that something important was happening. "Among my people," Chief Tallwater continued, "when a man saves the life of a chief's daughter, it creates a bond, a debt that cannot be repaid with simple gifts or words of thanks. The old ways teach us that such an act of heroism and honor deserves recognition of the highest kind." He glanced at Violet, who stood beside him, her expression unreadable. "I offer you the opportunity to know my daughter, to spend time with her, to learn our ways as she might learn yours. If in this knowing you find that your spirits are compatible, that your hearts speak to each other, then I would welcome you as a son through marriage, joining our peoples in a bond of family and friendship." The words hit Ethan like a physical force. He stared at the chief, then at Violet, trying to process what he had just heard. A marriage offer. The chief was suggesting that he court Violet with the possibility of marriage. It was unprecedented, unexpected, and completely outside anything Ethan had imagined when he woke up yesterday morning to move cattle. "Chief Tallwater," Ethan began carefully, "I am honored beyond words, but I do not want your daughter or you to feel obligated because of what happened. I did what any decent person should do. That does not mean I deserve such a generous offer." "You do not understand," Violet spoke up, her voice steady and clear. "My father does not make this offer out of obligation. He makes it out of recognition. You proved your character in how you treated me. Many men would not have been so honorable. My father sees value in uniting our families, yes, but he also would never offer me to a man he did not believe worthy, regardless of the debt he felt he owed." She paused, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw uncertainty flicker across her face. "The choice must be yours, but it must also be mine. My father offers the opportunity, not the certainty. We would spend time together, learn if we suit each other. That is all." Ethan looked between father and daughter, seeing the sincerity in both their faces. His mind raced with the implications. He was a cowboy, a ranch hand, a man without much beyond his horse, his saddle, and his wages. But he was also alone in the world, without family, without deep roots anywhere. And in the short time he had spent with Violet, he had found her intelligent, brave, and intriguing in ways he could not fully articulate. "I would be honored to accept your offer, Chief Tallwater," Ethan said slowly, the words feeling momentous as they left his mouth. "I would like the chance to know Violet, to learn about your people, and to see if what you suggest might be possible." The chief's expression warmed, and he nodded with satisfaction. "Then it is agreed. You will stay with us for a time. We will provide you with shelter and food. You will work alongside our men, learn our ways, and spend time with Violet under proper supervision, as is appropriate for an unmarried woman. If, after the winter ends, you both feel that a union would bring happiness, we will celebrate with a wedding that honors both our cultures. If you find you do not suit each other, you will part as friends, and no shame will attach to either of you." The deal was struck, and Ethan suddenly found himself not just a guest but a potential member of the Paiute community. The chief assigned him to share a lodge with James and 2 other young warriors, making it clear that while he was welcome, he would be expected to contribute and earn his place. Ethan had no problem with that. He had worked hard his entire life and saw no reason to stop now. The next weeks unfolded in ways that challenged and changed Ethan in fundamental ways. He learned to track game through snow using techniques different from those he knew. He learned to construct and repair the winter lodges, to cure hides, to make tools from stone and bone. The work was different from ranch work, but no less demanding, and he threw himself into it with determination, wanting to prove himself worthy of the chief's trust. But the most profound changes came through his time with Violet. Each day, under the watchful but not oppressive supervision of her mother or grandmother, they would spend hours together. Sometimes they worked side by side, processing food or making repairs to gear. Other times they walked through the snowy landscape, and she taught him about the plants that grew in the region, which ones healed and which ones harmed, which ones were sacred and which ones were simply useful. Through these interactions, Ethan found himself falling in love, not with a sudden crash but with a slow, steady deepening of feeling that felt as natural as breathing. Violet was unlike any woman he had ever known. She was independent and capable, able to skin a rabbit as easily as she could craft a poultice for wounds. She was intelligent, her mind quick and curious, asking him endless questions about his life, his beliefs, his dreams for the future. She was also beautiful, though it was a beauty that went beyond her physical features to something deeper, a grace of spirit that drew him like a moth to flame. He wondered, during the cold nights when he lay in the lodge listening to James snore, whether Violet felt the same pull toward him. She was harder to read than he was, her emotions controlled in a way that spoke to her upbringing as a chief's daughter. But sometimes he caught her watching him with an expression that made his heart race, or she would smile at something he said in a way that felt intimate and personal, meant only for him. One afternoon in late February, nearly 2 months after he had arrived at the camp, Violet took him to a place she called sacred, a hot spring tucked into a grove of trees about a mile from camp. The spring created a small oasis of warmth even in the winter cold, and steam rose from the water like spirits ascending to the sky. "This place is special to my people," Violet explained as they sat on rocks near the spring's edge. "We come here to heal, to think, to pray. I wanted to share it with you." "Thank you for bringing me here," Ethan said sincerely. "It is beautiful, peaceful." Violet was quiet for a long moment, watching the steam rise and disperse. Then she spoke, her voice softer than usual. "Ethan, I need to tell you something. When my father made his offer to you at sunrise that day, I was frightened. Not of you, but of what it might mean. I had always thought I would choose my own husband in my own time, that I would not be bartered or traded like property. But my father assured me that the choice was mine, that he would never force me into a marriage I did not want." She turned to look at him directly. "I want you to know that I choose this. I choose to spend time with you, and if you wish it, when the time comes, I will choose to marry you." The declaration stunned Ethan into momentary silence. When he found his voice, it came out rough with emotion. "Violet, I have been trying to find the courage to tell you how I feel. I did not want to presume, did not want to push too hard or make you uncomfortable. But the truth is, I have fallen in love with you. Not because your father offered you to me, but because of who you are. You are the strongest, smartest, kindest woman I have ever known. You challenge me, make me want to be better, make me think about the world in new ways. If you will have me, I would be honored to be your husband." Violet's face transformed with a smile that was pure joy, unguarded and genuine. "Then we are agreed. We will marry when spring comes and the earth awakens again." She reached out and took his hand, the first time they had touched with clear, romantic intent, and Ethan felt the rightness of it settle into his bones. They sat together by the sacred spring, talking about their future, making plans, dreaming aloud about the life they would build together. When they returned to camp hand in hand, everyone knew what had transpired. The women began planning the wedding with enthusiasm, and the men started treating Ethan with a new level of acceptance, as one who would soon be family rather than simply a guest. James clapped him on the shoulder and declared that he was glad to be gaining a brother, and the chief himself seemed deeply satisfied with how events had unfolded. The winter gradually released its grip on the land. Snow melted into rushing streams, the first green shoots of plants pushed through the softening earth, and the sun grew stronger each day. As March turned to April, preparations for the wedding intensified. Violet worked with the women to create her wedding clothing, traditional garments decorated with intricate beadwork and quillwork that took weeks to complete. Ethan, with help from the men, built a lodge that would serve as their home, learning to construct it in the Paiute style, but incorporating some touches that reflected his own heritage. The wedding itself took place on a warm day in late April, when the valley was painted with wildflowers and the river ran high and fast with snowmelt. It was a ceremony that blended traditions, honoring both Violet's Paiute heritage and Ethan's European background. They exchanged vows before the chief and the assembled tribe, promising to love and honor each other, to build a life together based on respect and partnership. Ethan gave Violet a ring he had commissioned from a silversmith in Yarrington, riding into town specifically for that purpose. Violet gave Ethan a necklace she had made, strung with beads and a bear claw that symbolized strength and protection. After the ceremony, the entire camp celebrated with feasting and dancing that lasted well into the night. Ethan danced with Violet, both of them laughing at his attempts to learn the traditional steps, and later they danced to fiddle music provided by a few white settlers who had been invited to witness the union, symbolic of the hope that their marriage might represent a bridge between cultures. When the celebration finally wound down and they retired to their new lodge, Ethan and Violet came together as husband and wife with a tenderness and passion that spoke to the deep love they had developed over the winter months. It was a night Ethan would remember for the rest of his life, not just for the physical union but for the emotional completeness he felt, the sense that he had finally found where he belonged. Their life together settled into a rhythm over the following months. Ethan continued to work, now splitting his time between helping the tribe with various tasks and occasionally hiring out to ranches in the area when they needed extra hands during cattle drives or branding season. The money he earned helped support not just him and Violet, but contributed to the tribe's welfare, which earned him even more respect from the people who had become his family. Violet continued her work with healing plants, and Ethan became her assistant of sorts, helping her gather and process herbs, learning from her vast knowledge of natural medicine. They made a good team, complementing each other's strengths and supporting each other through challenges. When some of the white ranchers expressed distrust or prejudice toward Ethan for marrying a native woman, he faced them down with calm certainty, making it clear that Violet was his wife, and he would tolerate no disrespect toward her. When some members of the tribe questioned whether a white man could truly understand or honor their ways, Violet defended him fiercely, pointing to his actions and his efforts to learn and integrate. As 1876 turned to 1877, Violet discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and a touch of nervousness, as any first-time parents feel. Ethan found himself thinking about his own parents, wishing they could have lived to see him start a family, knowing they would have loved Violet despite any cultural differences. Violet glowed during her pregnancy, her happiness evident to everyone who saw her, and Ethan felt a fierce protectiveness toward both his wife and their unborn child. Their son was born in September 1877, during the harvest season when the valley was golden with autumn light. The birth was attended by the tribe's experienced midwives, and while Ethan was not allowed in the birthing lodge per tradition, he paced outside with James and the chief, all three men united in their concern and anticipation. When Violet's mother finally emerged to announce that both mother and baby were healthy and strong, Ethan felt his knees go weak with relief. They named their son Daniel Morrison Tallwater, a name that honored both their cultures. Daniel had his mother's dark eyes and his father's lighter skin, a perfect blend of both heritages. Chief Tallwater proclaimed that his grandson would grow up knowing both worlds, able to walk between cultures as a bridge and peacemaker, and Ethan silently vowed to make sure that happened. The years that followed were full and rich. Daniel grew into a bright, curious child, loved and doted on by both his parents and the entire tribe. In 1879, Violet gave birth to a daughter they named Emma, who had her father's blue eyes and her mother's facial features, another beautiful combination of both families. 2 years later came another son, Samuel, who seemed to inherit the best of both parents in terms of temperament, calm and steady even as an infant. Ethan and Violet's marriage deepened and strengthened with each passing year. They learned to navigate the challenges that came with being an interracial couple in a time and place where such unions were sometimes viewed with suspicion or hostility from both sides. But they also found allies and friends, people who saw past skin color to the love and commitment that bound them together. The ranch where Ethan had worked before meeting Violet eventually offered him a position as foreman, recognizing his skills and integrity. The job came with better pay and a small house on the ranch property. After much discussion, Ethan and Violet decided to accept the offer, knowing it would provide more financial stability for their growing family. But they made sure to maintain close ties with the tribe, visiting frequently and ensuring that their children grew up knowing their Paiute heritage as well as their European roots. Chief Tallwater, growing older but still sharp of mind, watched his grandchildren grow with profound satisfaction. He often told Ethan that offering him Violet's hand that sunrise morning years ago was one of the best decisions he had ever made, that their marriage had indeed served as a bridge between peoples, showing that cooperation and respect were possible even in difficult times. In 1884, when Ethan was 32 and Violet was 30, they made a trip back to the valley where Ethan had first found Violet in the blizzard. It was winter again, though not as harsh as that fateful day 8 years earlier. They stood together in the place where their story had begun, their 3 children playing nearby in the snow under James's watchful eye. "You ever regret it?" Violet asked, slipping her hand into Ethan's. "Taking a chance on a woman you barely knew, agreeing to my father's offer that sunrise." Ethan pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Not for a single moment. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Violet. You and our children. You gave me a family, a home, a purpose beyond just drifting through life. I was lost before I found you in that storm. I just did not know it. I think the storm brought us together for a reason," Violet mused. "The universe knew we needed each other, that together we could create something beautiful and strong." They stood together watching the sunset paint the snow-covered mountains in shades of pink and gold, holding each other close while their children's laughter rang out across the valley. It was a moment of perfect peace and contentment, a snapshot of a life well lived and deeply loved. As the years continued to roll forward, Ethan and Violet grew older together, their love maturing like fine wine. They faced challenges, as all families do. There were lean years when ranch work was scarce and money tight. There were times when prejudice reared its ugly head, and they had to defend their family against narrow-minded people who could not accept their union. There were illnesses and injuries, heartaches and disappointments, but through it all, they had each other. They had built something real and lasting, a family that transcended cultural boundaries, a love that proved stronger than any obstacle thrown in their path. Their children grew into remarkable adults who carried within them the best of both their heritages, able to navigate both native and white societies with confidence and grace. Daniel, their eldest, became a teacher, dedicating his life to educating children of all backgrounds, believing as his parents did that knowledge and understanding were the keys to overcoming prejudice. Emma trained with her mother in healing arts and became a skilled nurse, eventually working at the hospital in Yerington, where she was respected by all for her competence and compassion. Samuel chose to work the land, becoming a rancher himself, but maintaining strong ties to the Paiute community, serving as a liaison and advocate for fair treatment of native peoples. In 1895, Ethan and Violet celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a gathering that brought together people from both their worlds. White ranchers sat beside Paiute elders, sharing food and stories, their children playing together without the prejudices their parents sometimes harbored. Chief Tallwater, now quite elderly but still commanding respect, stood to toast his daughter and son-in-law. 20 years ago, the chief said, his voice still strong despite his age, I made an offer to a young cowboy who had saved my daughter's life. I offered him the chance to know her, to court her, to possibly marry her. It was an unconventional offer, one that some questioned. But I saw something in Ethan Morrison that day at sunrise. I saw a man of honor, courage, and compassion. I saw someone worthy of my daughter, and I was right. He raised his cup. To Ethan and Violet, may they have many more years of happiness together. The toast was echoed by everyone present, and Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. He looked at Violet, whose hair was now touched with gray at the temples, whose face bore the lines of a life fully lived, and he thought she had never been more beautiful. She met his eyes and smiled, that same smile that had stolen his heart years ago by a sacred spring. Thank you, Ethan whispered to her, for choosing me, for building this life with me, for every single day we have had together. Thank you for finding me in that storm, Violet whispered back, for saving my life so that I could share it with you. They kissed, surrounded by family and friends, surrounded by the life they had built together through love and hard work and unwavering commitment to each other. It was a kiss that spoke of history and future both, of passion that had not dimmed despite the passing years, of partnership that had only grown stronger with time. As 1895 turned to 1896, and then to 1897, Ethan and Violet watched their children start families of their own. Daniel married a schoolteacher from Yerington, a sensible woman named Clara who embraced her husband's mixed heritage with genuine warmth. Emma wed a doctor who had come to Nevada from back east, a man named Thomas who valued her knowledge and treated her as an equal partner in both life and work. Samuel married a Paiute woman named Sarah, continuing the blend of cultures that had defined his upbringing. The grandchildren began to arrive, and Ethan and Violet delighted in their new roles as grandparents. They had 9 grandchildren in total over the years, each one unique and precious, each one carrying forward the legacy of love and cultural respect that Ethan and Violet had worked so hard to establish. Ethan taught his grandsons to ride and rope, just as his father had taught him. Violet taught her granddaughters about healing plants and traditional crafts, passing on knowledge that stretched back generations. Chief Tallwater passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1899, at the age of 73. His death was mourned by both the Paiute community and the white settlers who had learned to respect him over the years. Ethan and Violet took his passing hard, for the chief had been not just a father and father-in-law but a mentor and friend. But they also celebrated his life and the legacy he left behind, a legacy of wisdom and leadership that had guided his people through tremendously difficult times. James Tallwater became chief after his father, and he proved worthy of the role, continuing his father's policies of careful negotiation with white authorities while fiercely protecting Paiute rights and traditions. He leaned heavily on Ethan for advice about dealing with white ranchers and businessmen, valuing his brother-in-law's insight into both cultures. As the new century dawned in 1900, Ethan and Violet found themselves in their late 40s, watching the world change around them. The wild west of their youth was fading, replaced by increasing civilization, railroads, telegraph lines, and growing towns. Nevada was on the cusp of major changes with the discovery of new silver deposits and the influx of people seeking fortune. Through it all, Ethan and Violet remained constants in each other's lives, their love the anchor that held steady no matter how the world shifted. They still lived in the house on the ranch, though Ethan had gradually transitioned from active foreman work to an advisory role as his body accumulated the aches and pains of decades of hard physical labor. Violet continued her healing work, now passing her knowledge to both Emma and several younger Paiute women who showed aptitude for the craft. In 1905, on a warm spring day much like the day they had married 28 years earlier, Ethan and Violet rode out to the place where their story had begun. It took them longer now, their bodies not as resilient as they once were, but they made the journey because it felt important, a pilgrimage to honor what they had built. The rocky outcropping where Ethan had sheltered Violet from the blizzard was still there, unchanged by the passage of time. They dismounted and stood together, hands clasped, remembering that desperate night when a cowboy and a native woman had been thrown together by chance and circumstance. "If I could go back and tell my younger self what would come from that night," Ethan said softly, "I am not sure she would believe it. A lifetime of love, children and grandchildren, a place in two worlds instead of being lost between them." "I would tell my younger self not to be afraid," Violet replied. "Not to fear my father's offer or the unknown future. I would tell her to trust in the strength she would find, both in herself and in the man standing beside her in the storm." Ethan turned to face Violet fully, taking both her hands in his. "You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. You are still the person I want to talk to at the end of every day, the person whose opinion I value above all others. I love you as much today as I did when we married, maybe more because I know now just how precious what we have is, how rare and special." Tears glimmered in Violet's eyes, but they were happy tears. "And you are still the man who saw me as a person first, before anything else. The man who treated me with respect and honor when he could have done otherwise. The man who chose to learn and grow rather than insist his way was the only way. I love you, Ethan Morrison. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." They stood together in that place of beginnings, renewing the vows they had spoken so long ago, reaffirming the commitment that had carried them through nearly 3 decades of life together. It was a private moment, sacred in its intimacy, witnessed only by the land that had brought them together and held their story. The years continued to pass, as years do. Ethan and Violet grew older, their hair turning white, their steps growing slower. But their minds remained sharp, and their love remained strong. They watched with pride as their children and grandchildren thrived, building lives that honored the best of both their heritages. In 1912, when Ethan was 60 and Violet was 58, they were honored by both the Paiute tribe and the Yerington Town Council for their work in promoting understanding and cooperation between cultures. It was a rare recognition, and it moved them deeply to see how far things had come, how many people now saw past old prejudices to the common humanity that connected all people. "We did not do anything special," Ethan protested when people called them heroes or pioneers. "We just loved each other and tried to treat everyone with respect. That should not be revolutionary, it should be ordinary." But Violet understood that what they had done was special, whether Ethan wanted to admit it or not. In a time and place where cultural divisions ran deep, they had built bridges. They had shown that love could transcend boundaries, that families could blend heritages, that people of different backgrounds could not just coexist but thrive together. As they entered their 60s and then their 70s, Ethan and Violet began to slow down significantly. Health issues that come with age crept in, though they faced each challenge together as they had faced everything else. When Ethan's arthritis made it hard for him to saddle a horse, Violet learned to do it for him. When Violet's eyesight began to fail, Ethan learned to help her sort and prepare her healing plants using touch and smell as much as sight. Their children worried about them living alone, but Ethan and Violet insisted on maintaining their independence as long as possible. They had lived their lives on their own terms, and they intended to continue doing so. However, they did accept help when it was truly needed, understanding that allowing family to assist them was not weakness but wisdom. In the spring of 1920, Violet fell ill with pneumonia. At 66 years old, her body struggled to fight off the infection despite Emma's best medical care and the traditional remedies Violet herself had taught her daughter. Ethan barely left her side during the 2 weeks she battled the illness, holding her hand, talking to her, refusing to consider a world without her in it. But Violet was a fighter, always had been. She pulled through, though the illness left her weakened. As she recovered slowly over the following months, Ethan devoted himself entirely to her care, cooking her favorite foods, reading to her, helping her regain her strength through gentle exercises and walks. "You saved my life again," Violet told him one afternoon as they sat together on the porch of their house, watching the sunset paint the Nevada sky in brilliant colors. "Just like you did that night in the blizzard, 44 years ago." "We have been saving each other our whole lives," Ethan corrected gently. "That is what marriage is, I think. Being there to catch each other when we fall, to lift each other up when we are down, to remind each other why life is worth living." By the time Violet fully recovered, both of them understood that their time was growing shorter. They were in their late 60s now, and while they still had good days, the trajectory was clear. But rather than becoming maudlin or fearful, they chose to embrace each day, to find joy in simple things, to celebrate the extraordinary life they had built together. They took a final trip to the Paiute winter camp in the valley, now a much smaller settlement as younger generations had dispersed to towns and ranches throughout the region seeking economic opportunity. But James was still there, himself an old man now, and the few remaining elders welcomed Ethan and Violet with warmth and reverence. They sat around the fire that night, telling stories about the old days, about Chief Tallwater and the winter of the Great Blizzard, about the wedding that had joined 2 families and 2 cultures. The younger people listened with interest, many of them descendants of that union through various family connections, all of them beneficiaries of the bridges Ethan and Violet had built. "Your story gives me hope," one young woman said. "It shows that love and respect can overcome anything, that we do not have to choose between our heritage and the modern world, that we can be both. That is the lesson we hope to leave behind, Violet said. That identity is not about choosing one thing or another, but about embracing all of who you are, all the different streams that flow together to make you unique. In 1924, Ethan and Violet celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. It was a major milestone, one that called for significant celebration. Their children organized a party that brought together more than 100 people, family and friends from every part of their lives. There were tears and laughter, music and dancing, stories shared and memories honored. Ethan and Violet stood together before the assembled crowd, his arm around her waist, her head resting against his shoulder, and they spoke about their 5 decades together. 50 years ago, Ethan began, his voice still strong despite his 72 years. I made a choice that changed my life forever. I chose to accept an offer made at sunrise by a wise chief who saw in me something I was not sure I saw in myself. I chose to spend time getting to know a remarkable woman, and then I chose to spend my life with her. They were the best choices I ever made. And I chose him, Violet added, her voice clear and proud. I chose to see past the color of his skin to the content of his character. I chose to trust in love rather than fear. I chose to build a bridge rather than maintain a wall. These choices were not always easy, but they were always right. Their grandson Daniel, the eldest grandchild named after his father, stood to toast them. Grandmother and grandfather, you have shown us all what true love looks like. Not the easy, romantic kind of love that poets write about, but the hard, lasting kind that weathers storms and overcomes obstacles. You have shown us that family is not just about blood but about choice, that culture is not a cage but a gift, that the future belongs to those who can honor the past while embracing change. We love you, and we thank you for the legacy you have given us. The toast was echoed by everyone present, and Ethan and Violet stood together, surrounded by the family they had created, the community they had helped build, the love they had nurtured for 5 decades. It was a moment of complete fullness, of profound gratitude, of recognition that their lives had mattered, had made a difference. As 1924 turned to 1925 and then to 1926, Ethan's health began to decline more seriously. The hard years of ranch work caught up with him, and his heart began to show signs of weakness. Violet, despite her own frailties, devoted herself to his care just as he had cared for her years before. Their children took turns staying with them, making sure neither parent was ever alone or without help. One night in October 1926, Ethan and Violet lay in bed together, holding hands in the darkness. They had been married for 52 years, together for 53 if you counted the winter before their wedding. Ethan's breathing was labored, and both of them knew his time was growing very short. "I am not afraid," Ethan whispered. "I've had a good life, better than I ever dreamed possible. And I've had you. That was enough. That was more than enough." "You gave me everything," Violet whispered back, tears streaming down her face. "You gave me love and partnership and equality when so many women, especially Native women, received none of those things from the men in their lives. You honored me, respected me, stood beside me as an equal. You were the greatest gift I ever received. Promise me something," Ethan said, squeezing her hand with what strength he had left. "Promise me you will keep living, really living after I am gone. Not just existing, but finding joy, spending time with our family, sharing your knowledge, laughing and loving. Promise me." "I promise," Violet said, though the words broke her heart. "But you promise me something too. Promise me that you will wait for me wherever we go after this. Promise me that we will find each other again, just like we found each other in that blizzard." "I promise," Ethan said. "I will wait forever if I have to. I will find you in the next life, and we will begin again." They fell asleep holding hands, and when morning came, Ethan Morrison did not wake. He passed peacefully in his sleep, 74 years old, surrounded by love, having lived a life full of purpose and meaning. Violet mourned deeply, as anyone would mourn the loss of their life partner, the person who had been their other half for more than 5 decades. But she also celebrated his life, telling stories about him to anyone who would listen, making sure that his memory lived on not just in the family but in the community. True to her promise, Violet kept living. She continued her work with healing plants, training a new generation in the old ways. She spent time with her children and grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren, who had begun to arrive. She advocated for better treatment of Native peoples, using her unique position as a bridge between cultures to speak truths that needed to be heard. But everyone could see that part of her had gone with Ethan, that she was waiting for the day when they would be reunited. She visited his grave every week, sitting beside it for hours, talking to him as if he could hear, telling him about the family, about changes in the world, about how much she missed him. 2 years after Ethan's death, in the winter of 1928, Violet caught a cold that developed into pneumonia again. This time, at 74 years old and without her life partner to fight for, her body did not have the strength or will to recover. She died peacefully, surrounded by her children, with Emma holding one hand and Daniel holding the other. Her last words were, "I am coming, my love. Wait for me just a little longer." They buried Violet beside Ethan in the cemetery overlooking Yerington, Nevada, with a headstone that read, "Together in life, together in eternity. A bridge between worlds, a testament to love." The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, both native and white, all of them touched in some way by the couple who had dared to love across cultural boundaries, who had shown that respect and understanding were possible even in the hardest times. James Tallwater, now very old himself, spoke at the service, his voice trembling with emotion. "My sister and her husband showed us all what is possible when we choose love over fear, when we choose to see each other as human beings first and foremost. Their legacy lives on in their children and grandchildren, in the bridges they built, in the lives they touched. We will not see their like again, but we will carry their lesson forward, that we are all one people, all children of the earth, all deserving of dignity and respect." The years rolled on after Violet's death, and the world continued to change. The Wild West of Ethan and Violet's youth became history, preserved in stories and memories, but no longer the lived reality. Nevada grew and modernized for better and worse. The Paiute people faced new challenges and found new ways to preserve their culture and identity. But through it all, the story of Ethan Morrison and Violet Tallwater remained, passed down through generations as an example of what love could accomplish. Their descendants grew numerous, spreading throughout Nevada and beyond, carrying with them the dual heritage their grandparents or great-grandparents had fought to preserve. Many of them became leaders in their communities, teachers and doctors and advocates and artists, all of them embodying the lessons of respect, courage, and love that Ethan and Violet had taught through their example. Daniel Morrison Tallwater, their eldest son, lived to be 93 years old, dying in 1970. Before his death, he wrote down the complete story of his parents, wanting to preserve it for future generations. That written account, along with the oral traditions passed down through the family, ensured that Ethan and Violet's story would never be forgotten. In that account, Daniel wrote, "My father always said that finding my mother in that blizzard was the luckiest moment of his life. My mother always said that my father saving her was destiny, that the universe brought them together because they needed each other. I think they were both right. Their love was both luck and destiny, chance and choice, a perfect storm of circumstances that created something beautiful and lasting. They proved that love knows no boundaries, that family is what you make it, that courage and respect can overcome prejudice and fear. They were not perfect people. They made mistakes and had struggles like everyone does. But they loved each other with a devotion and passion that never wavered, and they built a family and a legacy that will endure for generations to come. I am proud to be their son, and I hope that I have lived in a way that honors their memory and continues their work of building bridges between people. That testament, written by a son who had witnessed his parents' love story firsthand, became a treasured family document, read at weddings and anniversaries, shared with each new generation as they came of age. It reminded them where they came from, what they stood for, and what was possible when people chose love over hate, understanding over ignorance, unity over division. The story of how a cowboy rescued a native woman from a blizzard in 1876, and how a chief made him an unforgettable offer at sunrise, became more than just a family story. It became a legend, a parable, a reminder that even in the darkest storms, whether literal or metaphorical, human connection and compassion can light the way forward. It showed that the choices we make in moments of crisis can echo through generations, shaping not just our own lives, but the lives of countless others who come after. And somewhere in whatever realm exists beyond this one, Ethan Morrison and Violet Tallwater were together again, their hands clasped, their love eternal, their story complete.